So, it all started on a Tuesday. I know, typical, right? But hear me out. It was basketball season, and me and my best friend Sarah were totally hooked. We loved going to games, catching up with a crowd, and, let's be real, sneaking in a few beers just to make things a little more interesting. We were always that duo, causing just the right amount of chaos, but never crossing the line. This time, though, we were doing things a little differently. Sarah had been raving about VIP boxes at the stadium for weeks, and I was kind of on the fence. They were expensive, but for some reason, the thought of being away from the usual crowd, the crazy fans, the loud clapping, it felt luxurious. And maybe a little exclusive. Like we were part of something bigger than just regular ticket holders. Anyway, I wasn't sure about it, but Sarah had this look in her eyes that made me think she was set on it. So I went along with it. We bought the VIP passes, and to my surprise, it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought. Sure, it cost more than the usual tickets, but the comfort of having our own little corner was well worth it. A few strangers shared the box with us, but for the most part, it was just the two of us, alone in this fancy little world where we could sip our drinks without anyone bumping into us or spilling beer on us. The game was exciting, but honestly I was distracted. Sarah kept eyeing one of the guys in the box next to ours. He wasn't our type, but there was something about him that caught her attention. She was doing that thing she does when she gets a crush, biting her lip, giving him shy looks, the whole thing. I knew exactly what she wanted, and since we shared everything, I instantly felt the same way. I couldn't help but notice how confident he was, how masculine he looked, even though he was just watching the game. He was tall, dressed in a crisp suit, and had this mysterious, cool vibe that made him stand out from the rest of the people in the box. Honestly, it wasn't even about the game for me anymore. I was watching him too. Now, I'm not saying I fall for guys like that all the time. I'm not exactly the type who just swoons over every tall, dark-haired guy. But this one was different. He had this aura about him, this confidence. You could tell he knew he was in control, and there was something about that that had me drawn in. At one point, he turned his head and caught me staring at him. For a second I panicked, but then he smirked. A little grin like he knew exactly what I was thinking. Anyway, after a while, Sarah leaned in and whispered, "I think I want to get to know him better." It wasn't the first time I'd heard her say that about a guy, but this time it felt different. Normally I would just nod and move on, but I wanted to know him too. Maybe it was because of the way he looked at me, or maybe it was just the idea of doing something a little out of the ordinary. Whatever it was, I found myself agreeing with Sarah. "Let's go talk to him," I said without thinking twice. So we did. I won't lie, there was a little rush in it. A little thrill, like we were stepping into unknown territory. We walked over to him, and I could feel the excitement building up as we got closer. He was standing by the window, staring out at the game, but as we approached, he turned and flashed that same grin. This time it felt more mysterious. Like he was waiting for us to talk. Nothing big, nothing too serious, just some casual chat about basketball, the usual. But I couldn't help but notice how he was looking at both of us. There was this knowing, playful glint in his eyes, like he was enjoying the attention. I don't know what it was exactly, but something about that moment, the setting, the way the conversation was flowing, it just felt right. For once, I was feeling bold. And I could tell Sarah was too. We were both looking at him, and I could see that look in her eyes, the one she gets when she's interested in someone. I'm sure I had the same expression on my face. Now, here's where things started to take a turn I didn't expect. I won't give everything away just yet, but I'll say this. The idea hit me like a lightning bolt. It was impulsive, it was spontaneous, and it was probably the worst idea I could have had. But then again, maybe it was the best too. Did I have a plan? Well, you could say I did, but it wasn't exactly thought through. And that's what ended up causing all the chaos. But let me save that part for later. I'll tell you what happened next. And trust me, it was a twist I never saw coming. So, after that little chat with the guy, I figured the whole thing would just fade out. I mean, yeah, we were having fun, and yeah, I was feeling bold. But a swing party, that's a whole different level. I mean, we were in a VIP box at a basketball game, not at some hidden club or private lounge. The idea felt insane. I thought Sarah would forget about it. I figured she would laugh it off. But no, she didn't. We got back to our seats, and she was already buzzing with excitement. It was like her whole demeanor changed, like the idea was already planted in her head, and there was no stopping her. I remember she kept looking over at that guy, and the look in her eyes said it all. She wasn't backing down from this. And, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I was more shocked or intrigued. But then, Sarah turned to me with that mischievous grin she always gets when she's about to make a suggestion that I know I'll never hear the end of. "What if we just do it?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper, like she was testing the waters. I blinked. "Do what?" She leaned in closer, practically whispering in my ear. "You know, a swing party. With him. And someone else. I mean, we're in a private VIP box. No one will bother us." Froze. No way. No way in hell was I going to do that. There were glass windows. Anyone could see us. The administration could pop in at any moment. And who knows what could happen after that. I shook my head. "You're crazy," I said, my voice low, almost like I was trying to convince myself more than her. "Whoa. Everyone will see us here. Everything will be visible, Sarah." But she wasn't having it. I knew this wasn't going to be a simple no situation. Sarah had this way of convincing me, and when she got an idea in her head, it was like a force of nature. She wouldn't stop until she got her way. I could see the excitement in her eyes, and I wasn't sure if I was more scared or fascinated by it. "Come on, think about it," she said, leaning back in her chair and giving me this playful look. "It'll be fun. Just once. No one even knows we're here." I shook my head again, trying to brush it off. "Sarah, no. This is ridiculous. We're not doing this here. This is insane." She didn't let up. I could tell she was really pushing for this. And if I'm being honest, part of me was curious. But the other part of me, the sensible part, was screaming at me to get out of there, to stop this before it went any further. Then Sarah stood up. I watched her go over to the guy we had been talking to earlier, the one who had that air of confidence about him. I wasn't sure what they were talking about, but the way Sarah was leaning in close to him, whispering in his ear, gave me this feeling I couldn't shake. My heart started to race, and I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me was nervous, no, terrified. But another part of me, well, that part was intrigued. Sarah came back a few minutes later. But this time she wasn't alone. That guy was with her. Froze. I didn't know what to say. He walked right up to me with that same confident smile on his face, and I could feel the heat in my cheeks. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. Sarah's grin was wide, her eyes sparkling like she had just won some secret game. I could tell she was getting exactly what she wanted. Then the guy, with his casual demeanor, said something that made my stomach drop. "So, I was thinking about what you said earlier," he started. "I wouldn't mind at all having a swing party here. In fact, it's something I've done before. Quite a few times, actually." I just stared at him, blinking in disbelief. I didn't even know how to respond. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't even a real plan. My brain was still trying to catch up with the situation. He was serious. Then, to my shock, he invited a few more people in. A couple of his friends who had been hanging around the event came into the box, and before I knew it, things started happening way too fast. I felt a rush of adrenaline, a little excitement but also fear. I was trapped in a situation I wasn't sure I wanted to be in, but at the same time I couldn't walk away. But there was a huge problem. The glass walls. I kept looking over at them, wondering if anyone could see us. The idea of someone from the stadium, an employee, an official, walking in at the wrong moment made me feel like I was living on the edge. The whole thing was so public, so exposed. But somehow we ended up closer to the glass, trying to hide our actions as much as we could. The thing was, though, we were still visible. Anyone walking by the stadium could have easily seen us. The thought made my heart race faster, but there was no turning back now. Sarah was already so into it, and the group was getting comfortable. It was crazy. It was terrifying. It was like living out a fantasy, but in the most dangerous way possible. I could hardly focus on the game anymore. My mind was too overwhelmed with what was going on right in front of me. I didn't know what to expect next. But one thing was for sure. I was going to remember this moment for the rest of my life. So there I was, right in the middle of it all. Honestly, I didn't even realize how much I had let go until I found myself completely relaxed, letting the moment take over. It was strange, really. I was so caught up in the excitement, in the rush of adrenaline, that I forgot where I was for a bit. I didn't care about anything outside the VIP box. It was just us, the people who had come together, and the crazy idea that turned into something more than any of us expected. And as it always goes in situations like this, when things are going the best and you're having the time of your life, that's when everything decides to go horribly wrong. Of course, it's the way life works. But no one could have predicted what happened next. We were wrapping up, getting closer to the end, and everything felt just right. It felt like nothing could ruin the moment. I had even managed to forget about the glass walls for a while, completely losing myself in the fun. We were laughing, relaxing, and just enjoying the high of the whole thing. For a few minutes, everything was perfect. No worries. No rules. Just us. But then bang. The door to our VIP lounge opened. It was such an innocent thing. The door creaked, and for a split second, I didn't even register what was happening. I was too lost in the moment. But then I turned around. And that's when my heart stopped. There, standing in the doorway, was the last person I ever wanted to see. The administrator. My stomach dropped. It was like everything around me suddenly slowed down, and all the energy in the room disappeared in an instant. He stood there, staring at us. His face a mix of disbelief and anger. I could feel the blood drain from my face as he started shouting at us. His voice trembling with frustration and shock. "What do you think you're doing?" he yelled, his eyes wide. "Do you have any idea what's going on here? We can see everything you're doing through the windows. People have been filming you. Do you realize what you've done?" Just froze. My mind couldn't catch up to what was happening. We were being watched. The thought hit me like a ton of bricks. In that moment, all the excitement from earlier felt like a distant memory. I couldn't even process what he was saying. We were exposed. People had seen us. And worse, they were filming us. I could feel a wave of embarrassment and panic hit me all at once, my cheeks burning with humiliation. My stomach was in knots. Why didn't we close the door? It was like everything came crashing down in an instant. I could hear the administrator still shouting at us, but honestly, I was in a daze. My heart was pounding in my chest, and all I could think about was how everyone had seen what we were doing. I was speechless, my mind completely blank as I tried to make sense of everything. What were the consequences? What would happen to us? Was this some sort of prank? No, this was real. The next thing I knew, security came rushing in. I wasn't sure if they were called by the administrator or if they just saw everything on the cameras. Either way, they were quick. Too quick. I started to panic. My mind was racing and I could feel myself spiraling. There was no way we were getting out of this without consequences. But this felt like the end. They weren't just going to kick us out. They were making sure we knew we'd crossed a line. I could hear one of the guards muttering about how unacceptable the situation was. I could feel my body tense up as they started to escort us out of the box. But then the administrator did something that made my blood boil. He added us all to the blacklist. I couldn't believe it. This wasn't just about getting kicked out. This was a permanent ban. We would never be allowed to come back. We'd never be able to watch basketball here again. And that's when I completely lost it. I started yelling. Everyone. Mostly at Sarah. 'Cause honestly, this was her idea. She had been the one to keep pushing for it. She had kept going and going until I caved. And now, here we were being kicked out, banned, and exposed in front of who knows how many people. I snapped at her, not even caring who was around. "This is all your fault, Sarah. You had to push it, didn't you? You made us do this, and now look where we are." My voice was trembling with a mix of anger, embarrassment, and disbelief. I could see Sarah's face fall, but honestly, I didn't care. I was angry. I was so angry. And I didn't know who to blame more, her or myself, for going along with it. We were escorted out of the building, and the entire time I couldn't stop shaking. I couldn't stop thinking about how many people must have seen us. The windows, phones, the cameras, everything. We'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. As the security guards let us out, I couldn't help but feel a mix of humiliation and regret. We'd done something impulsive, something that seemed exciting in the moment, but now it had all come crashing down around us. And I knew in that moment, nothing would ever be the same again. I'll be honest with you, after that day, things between Sarah and me went completely off the rails. I don't think I've ever been so angry in my life. The fight we had afterward. It felt like something straight out of a fable, like one of those stories where two characters make one huge mistake and can never go back to the way things were. When I got home that night, I completely lost it. It was like every ounce of frustration, humiliation, and anger I'd been holding inside came spilling out. I couldn't keep it together. I was screaming, pounding my fists into the walls, my whole body shaking with rage. I even started banging my head against the wall at one point, just trying to make sense of everything, but there was no sense to it. I couldn't stop the thoughts from racing in my mind. Why did we do this? Why did I let her push me into this? I wanted to take it all back. The whole thing. I wanted to erase it from my life, but I couldn't. It was too late. The moment we crossed that line, we couldn't go back. We couldn't undo what had happened. I couldn't stop thinking about how Sarah had dragged us into this mess. Because of her, we were all blacklisted. Not just me. Not just her. All of us. None of us would ever be allowed to step foot in that stadium again. I don't think I've ever been so furious in my life. The worst part. I knew I couldn't blame anyone else. I had gone along with it. I hadn't stopped it when I had the chance. I let it happen. I was just as much to blame as she was. But that didn't make me feel any less angry. The next day, everything started to unravel even further. I was scrolling through my phone, half out of habit, half out of some desperate need to distract myself from the chaos. And then I saw it. Video. It was from the basketball game. From our VIP box. I could barely believe my eyes as I watched it. The video showed us. The swing party. Everything. Every detail was clear. Every moment was captured in crystal clear quality. The only thing missing. Faces. Thank God for that, because I honestly don't know what I would have done if our identities were visible. But still. The entire scene was on full display. And though no one could identify us by sight, that didn't make it any less humiliating. I couldn't breathe as I watched it. The shame came flooding back, 10 times worse than it had been in the moment. Felt exposed. Felt small. The thought that anyone could see this, anyone could watch it, made me feel like the walls were closing in. People were talking. People were sharing the video. Who knows how many people had already seen it by the time I came across it. It was a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. And after seeing that video, something in me snapped. I couldn't stay in this city anymore. Not after what happened. The idea of being around people who might have seen that video, who might be talking about us. It felt suffocating. So I made the decision right then and there. I packed my things and moved farther away. Not just for a change of scenery, but to get away from the mess Sarah and I had created. So here I am telling you this story. Why? Because I don't want you to make the same mistakes we made. I don't want you to think that because something feels exciting or spontaneous in the moment, it's always going to be worth it. You need to think. I wish I had thought more clearly. If I had, maybe I could have stopped Sarah, maybe I could have prevented the whole thing from spiraling out of control. But it's too late for that now. The damage is done. And trust me, nothing good came from this. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of doing something rebellious, something wild. But let me tell you, this kind of thing never ends the way you think it will. It doesn't lead to anything good. You might think you're just living in the moment, but those moments can turn into lifelong consequences. Take it from me. Learn from my mistakes. Don't do it. It's not worth it.